Welcome into the Buddhist Wisdom Podcast. And today I have my friend Joe Wagner with us. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Super stoked to have you here.
Pleasure.
Um, Joe is a unique being in this world, as not only is Joe a, a longtime practitioner and fellow, I guess you could say, explorer of Himalayan Buddhism. But also, Joe does a lot of unique work with Tibetan medicines, all kinds of unique, I guess we could call them like occult substance objects. I don't know. How would you refer to them? I don't know.
Alchemical things. That's what
Alchem,
energetic medicine, this type of stuff.
cool, energetic, alchemical medicines for spiritual practice, health, rejuvenation, all that. And so a lot of that derived from Indian and Buddhist, various traditions, Taoism, I think too. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so I think just in that we could probably talk quite a bit. But to kick it off, I wanted, Joe reminded me today that today is the anniversary of the Parinirvana of Tulku Rinpoche, correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and
Tibetan lunar calendar.
okay, in the lunar calendar. And yeah, I just thought to kick us off with that. I mean, I think for our listeners, I think would really get a lot out of hearing some of your background as you've had the incredible opportunity to study with some of these great masters who unfortunately aren't with us anymore. Some are with us, but yeah, I thought I'd start us off there with maybe some of your experience in meeting Tulku Rinpoche and how your path started.
Mm,
Um, yeah.
sure. Well, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. And yeah, it's fun. This kind of stuff's fun. And especially talking about great beings like Telko Ujjayi Rinpoche. That's really fun. And today does happen to be his the anniversary of his passing in the lunar calendar. He died in 1996. Now it seems like a long time ago. Crazy. Next year, 20 or 30
It
years.
does. I was I was still in punk rock bands, staunch agnostic at that point.
Well, nothing's changed for you then. That's fine.
Yes.
Well, I was a Zen student first. I got into Zen when I was in college. I practiced Zen for about 5 years. I eventually wound up in Taiwan. I was teaching English after college and practicing Zen with Shengyen Fasher, the great Chinese master who had moved to Taiwan around the time that Chiang Kai-shek fled the mainland. And I love Zen. I still love Zen, and I still consider myself a little bit of a Zenpa, I guess. But I had always wanted to visit the holy places of the Buddha, especially Bodh Gaya and so forth. And so when my time came up to leave Taiwan, I had been connected to an Englishman, Welshman actually, who had lived in Japan for a long time at a Zen monastery, various Zen monasteries, and had moved to Taiwan to sort of try to seek out the roots of Zen, what was left
Mm,
of the roots. And because so many masters fled the mainland when Chiang Kai-shek left, so there's
mm,
still quite a bit of Zen going on in Taiwan, really an amazing place. Anyway, I met this guy, and he had moved to Taiwan maybe 7 or 8 years before I met him, and when I told him that I was going to go to Bodh Gaya and then I was going to go to Kathmandu, another place that had been on my list forever, he said, "Oh, if you're going to be in Kathmandu, you need to meet this Tibetan teacher. His name is Telku Ujjayi Rinpoche." And I was like, not that interested in Tibetan Buddhism. Seems really weird and full of magic and stuff that Zen doesn't really have a lot of to do with. And I was really into my Zen practice and so forth. But he said, "No, you'll meet him." And I kind of resisted. It was interesting.
mm,
And he finally said, when you meet a Zen master and you sometimes feel like they may know something. And I said, "Oh yeah, I've met a few great beings," and you think, "Oh yeah, they're cool. They know something." He said, "Well, when you meet a Tibetan master, you really know." And
mm,
his that really impacted me. I carried that with me. So I went to India, went to Bodh Gaya, did various things there, and eventually found myself in Kathmandu. And Steve is the name. He's actually a student of Dzongkar Khyentse and lives in Bhutan for a long time now.
mm,
But Steve had given me the name of a student of Tulku Ujjayi who was a friend of his, a Nepali, who's now quite an amazing master himself. But at the time, he
mm,
was he was running a hotel, and so he was just being like a practitioner more. And I called that guy and he said, "Oh, your friend of Steve's great. Let's meet." And we met and had a conversation. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had been hanging on to some questions, that people in Taiwan couldn't answer and Steve didn't know. And I couldn't find the answers in books. And I laid them out before his name is Sridhar Rana. And he knew the answer to everything. I was like, wow,
Mm.
this guy really got his finger on the pulse. So that intrigued me. And he said, "Oh, you have to meet Tulku Orjun. There's nobody like that." So uh, we went up to the mountains to do some trekking. And when we came back, they were about to start that annual Rangjung Yeshe seminar, which at that
Hmm.
time, Chokanima Rinpoche, has Kaning Shedrbling, and he would host the first. I mean, I think it was a 2 week thing. So for a week, he would give teachings on some text or whatever they were doing that year, and then everyone would go up to maybe it was 2 weeks actually. Everyone would go up to wherever Tulku Orjun was staying. Sometimes at Nagi Gompa, sometimes in Parping. They have a center there, and receive the introduction to the nature of mind, the pointing out instructions as they're called. So I I wasn't at all sure I wanted to attend this thing, but I knew one thing, and that was that I really wanted to buy a statue of the Buddha. I didn't
Mm.
have a good quality one, and Nepal's full of that stuff. So I found an amazing, beautiful statue of the Buddha made by Siddhi Raj, if any of your listeners know statue making in Nepal. He's like the grandfather of
He's
all.
still around, right? Or his
He
sons or
passed
something.
away. Yeah,
But
he's
there's a lineage of him. That's
yeah, cousin, brothers, every kind of person. But Siddhi Raj, I found a statue actually made by him, which was I can't believe that was just good fortune. Anyway, I had this beautiful
wow.
little statue. So I went to see. I knew that there was I don't know where I'd learned this, but there was a way to blessed for the master to bless the statue such that the actual essence of the Buddha was in the statue and it became a true object of veneration after that. And I thought that sounded amazing. So I was like, well, how do I do this? So I thought I'll go see Chokanima. But first I went to see Sridhar Rana and I asked him what I should do. And he said, you should really go see Tulku Urgyen for this. So he gave me the directions and told me who to talk to. And do you want to hear this? It's kind of a long story. I've got
Oh,
2
please.
minutes. So I give it the super short. If
Please.
if your listeners are interested, I gave this talk more extensively, and it's available on YouTube, on our
Cool.
Denver channel and other channels. So anyway, long story short, I showed up, and Rinpoche was staying in Parping at that time, which is of course where Guru Padmasambhava practiced, and at that point, the town of Parping, which is now like almost a small city, was just dirt crossroads, right? Nothing. And so I found a taxi, drove me out there. It took like 35 minutes, a lot different than now, which can easily be 2 hours, because Kathmandu has grown so much. But this is in '93. So I got out there and I had no idea what to do. So I just asked them and they said, "Oh, Tilka Origin is up this path or something." So I just walked up this path. There's nothing around, right? And now it's all built up, but at the time it was very quiet. And on the way up, I passed a nun, and I don't speak Tibetan very well now, but I didn't speak any Tibetan then. And I said, "Tulku Urgyen." That's all I knew to say. He was like, "Oh, Tulku." And then she kind of took my hand and led me up the path and led me to the place. And I went and I met Andreas Kretschmar, who is a longtime attendant of Tulku Urgyen and super cool guy. And I said, Sridhar Rana sent me to have my statue blessed. And he said, "Well, let's ask Rinpoche." So he leaned in and said to Rinpoche, and he said, "Rinpoche, right this way, you can see him." I went in, and the very instant I saw him, I I I couldn't give rise to thoughts. I was totally
Mm.
flabbergasted, I think is the best word. I was like, I was sitting there like, I knew I had a kata, that you offer and the statue, but I couldn't do anything. I was just like, just kind of standing there. And Andre's like, "It's okay. It's okay." And I kind of came back together. I said what I was interested in. Rinpoche blessed the statue. I left there. It was a very short meeting, maybe 10 minutes or something, very short. And the only thing I could think was I didn't know there was anyone still alive like that.
Mm.
I didn't know that these beings were still here. You think like, oh, the ancient times and Mahakasyapa and the Buddha himself and so forth, but that's thousands of years ago. But here's like appeared to me as an actual Buddha in physical form, just sitting on his bed, saying mantras with his rosary and just sitting there, totally chill. I got my mind totally blown. So I went down, actually, the best part of the story, I kind of went down, there was like a little bench or something, and I sat down just to try to get myself together. I was kind of sitting there, and this monk came along and spoke a little English, and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "America." And he kind of looked at me and he kind of pointed toward Rinpoche's room, but I didn't realize what he was doing. He said, "Big city." And I said, "Chicago?" Like, is that what he means? But he was actually saying Siddhi, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
power of the Lama, right? And then I kind of realized what he was saying. I was like, "Oh, they know." And so it was kind of I didn't know what to do. It lasted, that sort of state of affairs lasted for more than 24 hours. Like, I was
yeah.
completely, I couldn't believe it. And from then on, I thought, well, I just have to do whatever I can to learn what these guys know and see what I can do. So that's how it started for me with Vajrayana. I mean, I never gave up
Yeah.
my love of Zen, but in my experience in Zen, there's nobody like the Tibetans, especially those old timers grew up in Tibet and did all the retreat and stuff. Those guys are really special, and women too, obviously.
Yeah, wonderful. That's an amazing story. And from there, from what I know of our conversations and your background, um, you've also, I mean, you've met an incredible amount of masters, and including Adzon Pela Rinpoche. I know you spent a lot of time with him, as well as Nangchen Adi Rinpoche, among probably a lot of others I don't know of. That are more kind of hidden yogis, or you find in Tibet, and they're only known in this one part of Tibet. So this kind of leads me into, I mean, I just want to have this open invitation when stories pop up for you to of these great masters, if they weave into our conversation, because I think the more I try to become a decent practitioner of Himalayan Buddhism, the more I realize how important lineage is, how important what that actually is, because I think we talk about it a lot, but what do we mean by that? Because I haven't found a singular definition of that. It can mean many different things often.
True.
And then just your experience, because you've really been around, of sort of as someone, you're born in the States. I'm assuming born in the States, lives in the States, practicing these things and trying to go deep. Um, just some of your knowledge and wisdom that sort of comes off, especially from these meetings. You already started us off just in sort of this beautiful story of Tulku Oregon, where it's like just meeting someone like that is life transforming, let alone hearing words, right?
Gives you a new direction. That's at least it did
Yeah,
for I think it was for that kind of stuff. It's a matter of how ripe you are, right?
yeah,
I mean, the person I had been sitting a lot. I had been practicing Zen for about 5 years, and it was the main thing in my life. Of course, you have to do lots of stuff to be alive, but Zen was like my guiding principle, so to speak. And I was very inspired by the ancient masters and by the possibility of some kind of awakening in this life, and then to see it in such an obvious and resplendent way in the form of first Tulku Origin. And then you're right, I have been super lucky to meet a lot of these hotshots, the
yeah.
real people who live it, who really show it. And so I don't know. We can talk about lineage if you want. Is that what you want to talk about?
Yeah, I guess maybe to make the question more specific, and we can go there, is when you hear the word lineage, what does that mean to you? As a practitioner, as a
Well,
teacher of Dharma too.
I understand. It seems to me that lineage primarily, in its outer definition, refers to just the hand down of the insight primarily, right? Which was actually one of the main things I liked about Zen, because supposedly the Buddha held the flower and Mahakasyapa saw it, and he was the only one who kind of got it. He dug
Mm.
it. Right? And the Buddha said, the Dharma is transmitted to you, and then that went down to Bodhidharma. He went to China, went to Taiwan, Vietnam, Japan, so forth. So I guess in the outer way, lineage refers to, I'm your student and you are able to recognize in me something that I recognize in myself, which is that the insight, the primary insight of Buddhism, which is into the nature of our own minds, which is also the nature of reality, whatever you want to call it, has been inculcated or born in that person on some level, right? And then that person is able to transmit that to others, I guess, on some level, or at least make it available, since there's no real transmission, right? It's a self recognition because it's something we already have. So
Yeah.
in one respect, it's the hand-me-down from the primordial Buddha, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, Samantabhadra or Vajradhara, depending on your orientation in school, or from the Buddha himself, if you're in one of the more prosaic lineages of Mahayana or Theravada. That's what lineage seems to mean generally. But when I think about lineage, I think about what are we actually doing? What is the purpose of Buddhism, so to speak? We could say in a general sense, it's about ending suffering, it's about getting off the wheel of rebirth, whatever. But most of my orientation for this kind of stuff is sort of Dzogchen-y. I'm not a great
Hmm.
scholar and I'm not a great practitioner either. But most of my experience in Himalayan Buddhism has been in Dzogchen. And so in Dzogchen, what are we really doing? If you think about, those old style hand drills, they got like a round thing you hold and it comes down like this and looks like this. And then
Yeah.
the big and you go around like this. So
Yeah.
what is it that we're doing in Buddhism? Well, we're told the nature of mind is within you, right? And it's kind of, where is it? Is it in my head? Is it in my heart? You go through all these trainings and all this different stuff. And what you're really doing is you're turning your awareness toward yourself, right? Kind of like taking that drill and putting it on your chest and starting to drill. You're drilling into yourself. Who am I? What is my deal? What is making this happen? In Chinese Buddhism, they say, who's dragging this corpse around? Right? Well, that's like a way of meditating, right? So, if you really think about what lineage is, this is just Joe's opinion, right?
Well, I'm
Kind of
asking Joe, so it's good.
official view or whatever, just so people don't get
Yeah.
confused. This crazy Joe and what Buddhism says. It's not what Buddhism says, but it seems to me, if we talk about the lineage masters, let's say someone like Jigme Lingpa, right, who he had was tremendously motivated by the possibility of freedom and met in a vision Longchenpa, right? And how did he do that? By drilling into himself.
Mm.
And when he met Longchenpa, who was, several hundred years, almost 450 years earlier, what he saw in Longchenpa was not Longchenpa, right? It's the whole that Longchenpa had made in himself. That
Mm.
through that you can see the previous master's whole, all the way back to Samantabhadra. So what we're really doing, what lineage seems to mean to me, is to drill this hole through ourselves, so to speak, such that we come into contact with what is absolutely real, which is, the nature of reality. And having done that, we realize, this is the same as what my teacher has, the same as what that person's teacher has, and all the way back. So you're kind of like looking through this tube made out of all these holes in all these masters. And that, the primordial essence, so to speak, is kind of flowing through there. Another analogy would be like you've got a hose and you've got the spigot on your house and you're screwing your hose onto that. And then your
Yeah.
student is screwing their hose onto yours and the water can keep flowing. So that's what it seems to mean to me. The living insight into who we really are beyond body, beyond mind, and so forth, that's still alive in Tibetan Buddhism. It's alive in other forms too, but especially in the Vajrayana, it's really still here. The water from the source is still coming out. And so lineage is about seeing in that person the primordial, beyond their personality, beyond their tendencies. Sometimes their personalities are amazing and hilarious and fantastic and full of joy. And sometimes they're scumbags and weirdos. But you have the faith. If you see the whole, then you can screw onto that. And then that will flow through you. And that's what it seems to mean to me. Ultimately, because it's not so
Yeah.
much about like, I have this piece of paper of such a person who said this. And like, this is what so many people get into, right? But I personally don't know of how important that is.
Yeah. Well said. That is such a beautiful analogy. I love that analogy. You're hooking up to the pipe, so to speak, and carving out that hole. We have time. I'd love to get into what that hole means to you, but maybe we can do that a little bit later. Just to relate it, because often I'm you run Denver's Ocean. You're the main teacher at Denver's Ocean, and we can, want to talk about that also a little bit later. But I'm imagining you run into all kinds of practitioners at all levels, and I'm guessing mostly people, Americans, mostly people born in the West. trying to grok this. And, myself just over, the last, I don't know, 23, 24 years, just trying to connect with, what you're talking about, trying to not only understand that, but of course, trying to transform. I found it incredibly challenging at times, as well as, what gets in the way of that, me mostly, and so I kind of wanted to ask you, my question initially was, what do you think the enemy of what you just described is? But maybe I want to make it more specific to both what you've experienced as a Westerner and some of our traits that are, maybe wholesome and help us, and some of our traits that maybe work against us in connecting to Vajrayana lineage and Dzogchen lineage specifically.
Um, I'm no authority on students in the West. I can just give my opinion, I guess. Tibetans in Tibet, I've been lucky to spend quite a bit of time in Tibet, in spite of the Chinese influence there. And if you if you go to Calm, seems to be the best place. I mean, that's where most of the teachers that I've been able to study with live, and not as many Chinese there, and more spread out and so forth. You realize the Tibetans are extremely simple people. They're very earthy. That's I think why they've made such a big hit in the West. You know, they're easy, to like, they're cool. You know, they're fun and they're tough and they're hard. They're like animals. You know, they're outside a lot, kind of like just cool people. But they don't have a lot going on in their minds. They're not intellectuals mostly. Of course,
Mm,
anyone who receives an education. So I say the biggest difference, so to speak, would be that even the most educated, traditionally educated Tibetans, their education system is very different from ours. Western education has a lot to do with it really is the inculcation of scientific materialism into the person's personality. And I think anybody who went to school anywhere, Europe, South America, here, it doesn't matter, has this worldview as their base. The Tibetans don't have that. And as a result, they don't have to overturn this kind of hard science view of things, which I think does get in the way of a lot of people being willing to try. Because what is
mm,
practice? Practice is just trying, right? You're trying, we as practitioners are spiritual experimentalists, right? We're getting teachings from Tibetans, but we're not Tibetan. I do my practices mostly in English. So, which it has to be that way, right? Just like the Tibetans didn't do it in Udianese, right? They did it in Tibetan, right? So I don't feel bad about that. I think it's good. It's necessary. But when you're filtering these things, it becomes part of your deal. The Tibetans don't care if you do the practice or not, so to speak, right? We're not going to, in almost any case, is a Westerner going to become like an important lineage holder. You know, we see that,
yeah,
only, I mean, yeah, there are very few. And even the ones who are more small time than it is like the Tibetans are not receiving empowerments from Westerners, hardly ever, for
yeah.
instance, right? Their lineage is still strong, and it's a lot about family and a lot about nepotism and stuff. Some good, some not so good. Main thing, keep it going, right? And I'm up for that. For Westerners, we have to interpret these things and we have to figure out how can I apply this to my life. You actually, if you have a conversation with a Tibetan Lama in Tibet, someone who's not very familiar with Westerners, and you start to describe your life, their eyes get bigger and bigger. They're like, how can you handle that? You just described like the insurance situation. I just saw the doctor yesterday. I swear I had to fill out like 25 forms just to see the doctor. And that's just one thing. And it's all done online or on your phone. The Tibetans, their lives are very simple, right? And I think that in general, the teachings work better if your mind is not busy, not as busy. So we have a lot to overcome. Uh,
Mm,
but I don't have any Tibetan students, so I have no idea how they respond. Maybe they don't respond well. I have no idea. But for Westerners, we have to. I'm not much of a teacher, but as a teacher, you're kind of trying to get them to see the magic in it. Because once they see the possibility, see the magic, see the potential freedom, whatever you want to call that, then they're more apt to do the work. And the work is about quieting down the mind, looking behind the mind, the various things, and all the practices are all based on more clarity. And if your mind is crazy busy, then hey, maybe a year or two of shamatha will really help you. I got that fortunately in Zen, so I didn't have to do it in Vajrayana as much. Uh, but most Westerners, they don't have a lot of background in mental stillness, right? That's not encouraged in our world at all. In fact, you would be labeled as a special needs kid if you were in school meditating all the time, right? Or a general weirdo. That's not necessarily good. So here we have to kind of balance two worlds. We've got our main world, which is the world of this crazy you or Europe or whatever, which increasingly interpenetrating each other and increasingly complex and digital and electronic and AI driven and everyone knows, right? And much more
Yeah.
complex even than when I was a kid. I was born in 1969, right? That's a very different time. Now I mean, I have nephews and stuff, and they live in a different way. They're much more plugged in, and that's as good and bad. I don't know. So some of it is the process of getting them to see that there's something beyond this world. Because isn't that the promise of Buddhism, right? The
Yeah.
statement of the Buddha was that you cannot fix samsara. So that's maybe the thing that Westerners really have to get on some level. They have to dig this. If they can, then they're more willing to do some of the work, whether it's the Nundro or whatever, that can help to clear a space in which the real essence of the teachings can be born, so to speak, or can be recognized, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not that we don't want that we need to change our worldview because scientific materialism is popular and is, the number one educated method for seeing the world because it works the best, right? It's the most easy
Yeah.
to control the world. Living like a Tibetan, it doesn't work very well, in our modern world. So we really have to kind of do this. But if you can get the person to see, to have enough experience, whether that's through your presence or the blessing of the lineage or whatever, that they get a little bit of hook in there, then they can start to do that work because we're all the same, right? It doesn't matter if you're born in Com or you're born in Philadelphia, you're the same in terms of your essence. And once you start to hone in on that, then the practice is the same. We have different challenges, but most Westerners are super smart. When you talk to
Yeah.
Tibetans in Tibet, I've had Tibetans say like, wow, you guys are like Kempos. You know so much and you're so sharp and stuff. That's very rare. Tibetans are more on they just don't have that kind of education. Uh, but that is also like a little bit of a potential negative for us. I remember seeing in a book by John Blofeld. You know John Blofeld? He wrote,
I know of him. Yeah. The name.
he's
Yeah.
a Tibetan Buddhist, but he lived in China for like 16 or 17 years in the 20s and 30s and wrote a series of amazing books. I recommend to you and your listeners his autobiography, which is called The Wheel of Life. He wrote a book
Cool.
about living in Beijing before things changed so much. Amazing books and beautiful writer too. And he said in one of those things that most of his Buddhist education was unlearning what he learned in school. I thought it was very interesting. And he's talking about an education he received in the teens and the 20s in England.
Wow.
Now it's just, we
Yeah.
are it. We're not receiving an education. We live in that world of incredible complexity. But the Dharma is extremely simple. So, we have to figure out how can we fit that simplicity into this complex life. And I think that's the main challenge or whatever we have to work with.
Yeah, beautiful. No, very well said. More and more, and again, I always bring this kind of question up, and I question myself, and I talk about it in talks and on my podcast and stuff. Not as a way to criticize us and or our way of life, but just to, I see the Dharma as I'm hearing, you as well. It's both a way to understand our underlying nature and how to uncover that and uncover freedom essentially. But in order to do that, we also have to understand and diagnose our predicament accurately, you know,
Mm,
both the
absolutely.
samsaric predicament, like what you talked about, the human predicament, and then I would say, cultural ones and social ones. And I think, it always triggered, because you mentioned two of them already, this just Trungpa Rinpoche, how dead on he was about many things and tried to work with us, while he was alive to help us both use our strengths and work with our weaknesses. And he mentions these three things that defined Western society. You mentioned two: materialism, speed, and aggression. I think those are correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, if that's not what he said, but I believe it was materialism, speed, and aggression. Those were the things that needed to be diagnosed and treated, essentially, like remedied with a medicine. Not that we're bad. And yeah, I totally agree with you that, 'cause you mentioned materialism and speed, essentially, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
Did you want to talk
Um,
about aggression? I mean, doesn't even need to be talked about. Just look
yeah,
out.
I mean,
The world is messed up.
yeah,
Rise.
there's a lot of aggression and yeah. Well, if you want to talk about it, it's fine. I thought to sort of, because you use this word magic, which
Mhm.
I love that word. Even I remember like a paraphrasing, but a quote from Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche, where he said, "Vajra is basically magic with emptiness. That's essentially like what we're doing." Um, and when we had talked about this earlier before we started. For me, when I think of the magic of Vajrayana and the magic of the lineages we're exploring today, I also think of sort of how devotion connects into that and how you know I don't know for you or for others, but for me, devotion was and is quite challenging because of that intellectual material bent, habit, those habit patterns. So I just want to hear from you, because you spent a bunch of time in Kham in East Tibet, and like you said, the Kampas I've met who are straight from Kham, meaning like they didn't spend a lot of time outside. They're wild in an amazing way. They're very connected to the earth, very fun. Open. I don't want to generalize, say everybody, but you name something that I've experienced too, and in that I also see devotion. It's just in their blood. So what does
Mm.
devotion kind of mean to you and how have you both experienced it from others, your teachers, and in your own practice?
I'm happy to talk about devotion. It's one of my favorite things. But first, I want to tell a story I heard from
Yeah.
Kungadawa. Did you ever meet Kungadawa?
No,
Richard
no.
Arthur. He was Trungpa Rinpoche's secretary for a long time and was
Um,
the one who wrote the English version of the Sadhana of Mahamudra, which I
okay.
personally think is still the most beautiful English translation of a sadhana. It's like stands on its own, really gorgeous thing. When they were in Bhutan together in 1967. Anyway, he told me a funny story about Trungpa Rinpoche giving a public talk in Boulder. This was in the 70s, I think, and he was answering questions at the end of the talk, and someone stood up and said, Rinpoche, would you talk about the aggression in our world today? And he said,
Yeah.
I would rather talk about the aggression in this room. I always think that's so funny. He was an amazing comedian in addition to being a great Dharma
Yeah.
master. So yeah, he did focus on that. You don't have to look very far right now. Anyway, as for devotion, it's something so foreign to Westerners. And you know why that is? I think it's democracy. I'm not
Mm.
saying democracy is bad. I think democracy is still the best when it used to exist. Now it's being finished off. But democracy is still the best form of government that I know of. I'm not making statements. I don't care. But one of the outcomes of having a democratic view is that you see everyone as equal, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that there are beings in this world, they are not like me. They are much better on every level than me. And I think that for people who are hoping to make some progress in the Vajrayana, have some experience of this magical aspect that we're talking about, and you know, uh, change their lives, their inner and outer lives, based on these practices, it it would serve them to consider that it might be possible that not everybody is the same. And I'm not saying that we're not all valuable. I'm saying that some people are more valuable than others in a certain sense. And it's been
Mhm.
my direct experience of many, many times with many, many people in a lot of different places that this is the case. And having just hearing that, I'm hoping that people here will hear that and think, man, let me contemplate that. Three aspects of the teaching, right? Hearing the teaching, contemplating it, and then meditating. People don't think about that contemplation part, but we really are. We got to sort of mull over these things. But without that view, then you tend to, have the Sam Harris view. I like Sam. I think
Yeah.
he brings a lot of people to our group, so it's fine. But he has a view that he knows better than the Tibetans,
Yeah.
that the Tibetans are dumb, and that he got what Tolkien had, and then he applied it, and he's way smarter. I don't know if this is his real view, but this is very dangerous for us as Westerners. You really have to be able to see things in a hierarchic position, or else the blessings don't flow. If I met Tolkien, I was like, well, I'm a lot taller than that guy. Then, and so we must be about the same. I think this is a very weak position to start off on. We really have
Yeah.
to see that these beings have aimed their entire experience, many times, at least for the old time lamas, when they're recognized as Tulku was very young, their entire life, and sometimes that's 60 or 70 years. Tulku was recognized, he's 7 or 8 years old, and all his family were made out of masters, and direct lineage of Chogyur Lingpa. His grandmother was Chogyur Lingpa's daughter, and all this stuff. When you live in that kind of world, you automatically see the teachers as like, wow. And if you have that ability to see them, and I think that's something we have to work on as Westerners, then it's possible to really learn something. But if you think, I already know all this, I'm already way smarter, I got a PhD in psychology or whatever it is, it's almost impossible to make a connection, a meaningful connection with the teacher. And I think that's one of the things we have to look at. Not everybody's the same. And
Yeah.
if you can accept that, which sometimes you don't have to do any work, right? If you can meet a really great master, then sometimes if you have enough openness or karmic roots or whatever it is, it will automatically happen. That's what happened with me. I was so lucky, right? And being a true believer Buddhist on some level, it's past life work, right? Past life work. And so in my past life, I cleared away a smidgen of my karma, and I was able to see Tolkien more as he actually was than maybe somebody else had seen him. And I saw him in the presence of lots of different people, and many people didn't see what I saw in him. Just
Mm.
how it was. It wasn't like he had light shooting out of his body or something. I have seen that, but that's pretty rare. And it also depends on the view of the students. So I think the first thing is to contemplate whether or not these practices actually lead to people being amazing. Like, and in our world these days, they're very, very few. Most of the lamas, they seem like us, right? Some of them have university educations, very, very smart. What are they doing with their time? You mentioned Dzongkar Khyentse. What's he doing? He's making movies. He's running around the world. He's a real master. I think he's great. But if you look at him compared to my brother, who's a consultant, they do the same thing. They fly around in business class. They talk to people who have a lot of power and a lot of money. They have a lot of energy flowing through their lives in the form of money and ability to control people's interests. And it looks just like us. That's harder sometimes to see in those teachers who look so much like us, this special quality. The old
Mm.
timers do anything, right? You meet Toku on a Tuesday, he's sitting there. You meet him on a Friday, he's still sitting there, right? And most of their life was about retreat. And as a result of that, they really like give off the blessings. So
Yeah.
if you're trying to get into this, it's probably worth making a trip and trying to see some amazing people. I think Rob John Rinpoche is incredible.
Yeah.
The blessings are pouring off of him. He was here last year, I think, or a year and a half ago, and he told me personally that he not one week goes by when he doesn't dream of Khyentse Rinpoche. Khyentse Rinpoche encouraging him, telling him, yeah, make sure you do this, and every week. Think about that.
Wow.
He's sort of the primary lineage holder of Khyentse Rinpoche, Dilgo Khyentse. And even though Rabjam Rinpoche is, he's 61 or something, he's young, and he lives very much in our world, still in his presence, you think, wow, what is that? It's almost like a block of dry ice. If you have a block of dry ice on the table, you can see the carbon dioxide just boiling off of it, sublimating off of it. And it's like that. You can really feel it. It's like, wow, what is that? Amazing. We just had
Yeah.
actually Adzum Gyaltse Rinpoche here, who's sort of second in charge at Sechen. He's even younger than I am. He must be 44 or something. And an incarnation of the elder son of Adzum Drukpa, for your listeners who don't know him. And he had just come, I mean, like 3 weeks before, from giving the reading transmission for the whole of the Rinchen Terzo in Bhutan to like 10,000 people, right? And even though Rinpoche is very young and he hasn't had a chance to do a lot of retreat, he was sitting right here on my couch and giving some teachings to us, and you could feel it just coming right off of him, you know? So you got to have an open mind. You have a little bit of ability to withhold judgment until you can really feel it, because it's we have this sensory faculty in ourselves connected with our own nature, I guess, if you want to call it a sensory faculty, that can really see the amazingness in some of these beings. And it's not just Tibetans that have it, obviously. You know, I know, I mean, I'm a friend of Father Francis Tizo. Do you know him? He wrote
Yeah,
the Rainbow Body.
yeah, you were telling me before.
That guy's got it too. That guy's got it
Yeah.
too. Richard Lang, the headless.org guy, that guy's got it too. So it's not, I don't mean to say like you got to see a Tibetan, but it's more easy to see in someone
Yeah.
foreign. You know, what they say, what is an expert? A person from somewhere else, right? So it's easier when the person is very different. Like I
Yeah.
had the experience of Tilka. But I kind of took that in a different direction. Sorry. But I
No,
think
no.
that's where it starts to realize that it is possible for people to change or to blossom as something really extraordinary, like really with the actual qualities of the Buddha in our
Yeah.
time. That's still possible. The lineage is still alive. There are still masters. You know, I still have teachers in Tibet who live just like they did 500 years ago. Exactly the same. One of them spent 16 years living in a cave. So and that's not like a fancy cave. That's a cave that had no door. Like
Yeah.
I've been in these caves, and it's it's still alive. So if we have that openness and we make aspiration prayers, may I meet my karmically destined Lama, my Terapleki Lama, someone we have a connection with, you can see this. And that's what it really takes. Because without that, it's a crapshoot. It's an experiment, right? You're just kind of like, well, they say to meditate. I'm going to try to do it. But, this is dumb to use a mala, or this is stupid to make prostrations. I'm not bowing down to anyone. Without that, if you have that kind of attitude, Vajrayana is not going to work very well.
Yeah. That's an understatement. Yeah, and I think just to layer in something quickly, I think that partly I see, you're mentioning hubris. That's kind of what you're talking about, just sort of the hubris of,
I don't
you know,
even mean it like that. I don't mean it, and I apologize for my comments about Sam Harris. I don't even know Sam personally. But just that attitude of we know best. We can take a little bit of this, we can take a little bit of that. I don't know how well that works. You really have
yeah,
to sort of say, like, I don't know anything, right? As Sung Sanim, the great Korean Zen master, said, only don't know. You really have to have this beginner mind, like Suzuki Roshi talked about,
yeah,
when to really be able to get something out of this lineage. Seems.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, forgive me, I wasn't saying you were saying hubris. I'm going to say hubris. I think, in my experience, what blocks my devotion is often hubris. And, I'm going to bring in a word here because we've kind of been dancing around it is what I just call colonialism now. It's just a function of intellectual, cultural colonialism that sometimes blocks us from even opening to these things, and again, that's connected to things like autonomy and individualism and all those kinds of things. You're kind of that's what I'm picking up, and that's what I fight. I also struggle with personally, and see it.
We all do, right? We
Yeah,
all do. And it's not that the Tibetans that I'm talking about are perfect. They're not.
yeah,
In a sense, they are perfect, but it's a use of the word that's not what we normally mean, right? What it
yeah,
means, they have access to a type of insight that is extraordinarily rare anywhere else in the world. It's a piece of the ancient world that is still alive. And they took the Dharma in the 8th century and then again in the 11th century, and they took it to Tibet and they put it in the deep freeze in cold
yeah,
storage, and it stayed alive. 50s, incredible, incredible. And now we can still meet a few old timers and then a lot of the more recent generation raised by those old timers who are in touch with this kind of, I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous term, but ancient wisdom, right?
yeah,
A kind of primordial wisdom that in the West, because of those things you said, aggression, which is everywhere, speed, and the general complexity of our lives, become obscured. We become obscured. And Buddhism generally is about removing those obscurations.
Yeah,
That's really,
wonderful.
it is.
Yeah, 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 agreed. Um, so 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 kind of these aspects of in your practice and your discoveries of devotion and the way you're describing it, and I'm sure you could also describe in other ways if we had time. How's this helped you in your practice? I think that's
The
important for
foundation of
people.
the practice, right? It's the foundation of the practice. Longchenpa had
Yeah,
a statement, something like the actual heart essence, the ultimate realization, so to speak. I'm paraphrasing him, is only accessible through the merging of the student and the teacher's mind. Any other method should be seen as delusion, something like
mm,
that. And I think this is absolutely true. I know people who are far along in their Dzogchen practice who do not believe this, but this is the teaching as it is given in Tibet.
yeah,
It is about seeing the Buddha in the teacher. And with that, why? Not because we're trying to project onto them as being perfect. No, it's about opening up an internal vision that sees that hole in them that goes all the way back to Samantabhadra, to reference my earlier comment, right? If
yeah,
you can't do that, then it becomes a process of trying to learn something and then apply it in your little workshop. And he said,
yeah,
hold the hammer this way. So you go home and you try to do it. Maybe you do well, maybe you don't. That's not what it's about. I mean, devotion is the path. There's no other path, at least in Nyingma and Kagyu, right?
yeah,
I'm not as familiar with Sakya. I'm not as familiar with Gaelic, but if you look at the Dalai Lama, he's this too. So it must be that it's universal, right? It's
yeah,
about tuning into an aspect, a kind of non-personal aspect of the master. And that's what devotion is, right? Is seeing past their dirty skin or only outdoor bathrooms or whatever it is, and all that kind of crapola that we might be like, well, geez, they don't even have toilets here. How could they know anything? Whatever, into something that is primordially unchanging. And
yeah,
and in order to do that, I don't know what is required. We're going to be lucky, right? I think best thing to do is make aspirations. I'm a big
yeah.
fan of aspirations.
Me too.
Aspirations are
Yeah,
the only way that we can overcome. They're like shooting arrows into the future, right?
yeah.
That's the only way we can link up with this sort of. It's very hard. Vajrayana is not for everyone. I have several friends. Ian
No.
Bay, he's a close friend of mine, but he really wants to make Vajrayana like popularize it. I just don't. It's never been like that. Why? What?
Yeah,
It's other a secret mantra, right? It's got a secret quality to it. So it's not for everybody.
yeah,
If you have the link and you have the wherewithal, then it's still totally possible. And it's possible primarily through seeing the Buddha in the teacher. That's the main thing, right? And at least in Dzogchen, that's the Mahamudra lineage. This is exactly it, right? And and so how does it affect me? I mean, I was so destroyed by Tilka Wirjan. I couldn't have remained only a Zen student even if I had wanted to. I switched sitting on that rock. I was like, I'm going to do whatever he says. In fact, I went back there to request him to be my teacher, which I encourage all of your listeners to, if they really have a link with a teacher, to ask to be accepted as a disciple. This is not a popular thing these days, and it
yeah,
doesn't seem like people do it because they get the teachings in big groups and online, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you get the chance, you want the teacher to know you, even if they don't know you well. It doesn't matter. It's like the Sistine Chapel ceiling, right? God and man, they touch it. You have to touch it. Yeah, otherwise, it's a DIY project, and good luck, right?
yeah.
Well, I don't know what I was going to say there, but
Oh, how Tokarian blew you away like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
my mind just never recovered from that. Oh yeah, I went back there and I said, Rinpoche, please accept me as your disciple. Right. I said my whatevers. And he looked at me, he spent some time like staring at me and checking it out. And he said, you can be my disciple if you practice hard. And I did it. I'm doing it.
yeah,
And, but that was like a command kind of, right?
yeah,
And because of that, and because of that personal link, I feel like, Tulku Urchin's here with us now. He's
yeah,
always here. And
yeah. I feel that way too.
anniversary. That's wonderful. I feel very lucky and grateful. But on his non-anniversary, it's the same in some way, right? And that
Yeah,
seems to be the goal of the devotional thing, is that you're bringing the teacher. We visualize the teacher on top of our head. Songtsar Khyentse said one time that Only beginners visualize the teacher on top of their head. If you're really a practitioner, visualize them in the center of your heart. I like this.
Mm,
Why? Because that's where the essence lives. And when you
yeah,
mingle the your notion of the outer form of the guru with your inner insight that's in the center of your chest, according to the Dzogchen physiology, then you start to mingle your mind with the mind of the Lama. And then that's when the hole starts to appear in your own chest, right? That's when the water starts to trickle through your part of the hose. And
mm.
that's totally necessary. I know a lot of Westerners have trouble with this. What can you do? You just have to pray, right? And which they can't even do because they don't have any faith. So it's me, no, a catch
Yeah.
20 situation,
Well, you
unfortunately.
mentioned aspiration, and I think, for me these days, that's probably my favorite parts of Dharma practice these days. What I'm really digging into is aspiration and and devotional practice for the very reasons we're talking about it. But yeah, aspiration is huge, and I think it takes a while for that to click because we want it now. We don't want to like, oh, I'm going to do this in the future. Oh, that's useless in the West. We want it now, and I think that's something that, we have to contemplate, as you said, and kind of work with and question, is that true? Is that how reality works necessarily? Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, you can develop some devotion by reading the life stories of the masters. Everybody should read
Yeah.
Miller Epps' life story. I hadn't read it in quite a while, and maybe a year ago or someone was talking about the old La Lungpa translation, and one of the I think it was the original one.
I read that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I have that book, of course. I opened to some random page and started to read it, and I mean, tears rolling down my face,
Yeah.
right? And those books are very powerful. Crystal in the Way of Light was the first Vajrayana book I read by Norbu Rinpoche, and it just really it can really open your mind. The Life of Marpa that the Trungpa people put out, those are great books. And I
Yeah.
was fortunate enough to help sponsor the translation of Khenpo Nachung's autobiography, which is incredible too. And there's a bunch of books like this, right? So that's
Yeah.
one way. And then if you combine reading that kind of stuff with making aspirations, which I just tell you how to do it for a second, just my own view,
Yeah.
but it's really well for me, then you can really make progress, right? And the world is fluid. Things are fluid and our karma is not fixed. And so the way you make aspirations is two parts. You have to give rise to the aspiration, which is a thought, right? A
Mhm.
conceptualization. I meet my karmically destined Lama. May I meet someone who can guide me on the path. May I meet someone I have automatic faith in, something like that, whatever your deal is, whatever you're looking for. That's like knocking the arrow on the bowstring and pulling the bow back. If that's all you
Mm.
do, then it's like you just let it down and put it down. There's no arrow in the air. So what you have to do, this has been my personal experience, you make the aspiration, may I meet my karmically destined Lama, and then don't do anything.
Mm.
Even if you're not a meditator, you don't know how to do any kind of meditation, just let your mind be clear. And that is the letting go of the arrow. And then it's in the air, it's going. And it doesn't matter what you do then, right? The more arrows you shoot, the more likely you'll hit one of the targets, right?
Yeah.
So make these aspirations over and over, may I be able to attend the teachings? May I feel inspired? May I finish my nundro? And then after each one, may I finish my nundro? Then it's in the air. This really works. And it works
Yeah,
also
that's
for
great.
things too, but we're not talking worldly here. Really, that's important. Most people that make aspirations just think, may I do this? And then
Yeah.
then they go along. That's just a thought. That doesn't have much gumption, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that second step you added. Um, it's okay to just shift gears here. So, because I wanted to touch on this a little bit because, from our kind of personal conversations, I know you are a I don't know how to call it, staunch practitioner, interested, serious practitioner of also the path of means in Vajrayana. And it's,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I thought, well, my first question, it's kind of a two-parter. The first one is like, you know, how, for you, how do these lineages of Dzogchen and Vajrayana connect? That's the
Mm.
first question. And then the second is sort of, how does the path of means, well, first of all, what is that? And then how does that help us in our nature of mind practice as well as just Dharma practice in general?
It depends on your orientation. So, um, What was the first part? There's the path means. What was
Like how does the
Oh,
Vajrayana lineage and
Vajrayana and
Dzogchen lineage
Dzogchen. Yeah,
connect?
I
Right.
know that some people think that Dzogchen is totally separate from Vajrayana. I think this is absurd. This is not the view of Tilka Origin and totally wrong view. Uh, so, yeah, some of your listeners will be like, that's not what Malcolm says. I know Malcolm and I have had a lot of discussions about this. I personally think that Vajrayana is like a tree or something. And the final flowering, the fruit of it is at the very top, and that's Dzogchen. So you need to do these Vajrayana things. Why? Because otherwise we have absolutely no grounding for our practice. I don't know a single teacher, except Norbu Rinpoche did this some, but he wasn't a main teacher of mine, so I don't know. But in general, I think works a lot better to practice Dzogchen within the context of Vajrayana. It's part of Vajrayana, right? Dzogchen, it was developed in Tibet, and it grew out of a deeper and deeper understanding of the Mahayana. All these things are the same. All the Buddhist teachings are the same, right? We aim it because there's a little bit of Dzogchen chauvinism or Dzogchen self-selling, where you say, oh, Theravada, oh, then, there's the Shravakayana, then, oh, Mahayana, these are down here. Then we got all these other special tantric yanas, and the totally top one is Dzogchen. We're the best. We're the best. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is, if you don't have the context of Vajrayana, there's no opportunity because realization only comes about three things: clearing away obscurations, gathering accumulation of merit and wisdom, and receiving the blessings. You can receive the blessings all the time and get nowhere. Why? Because the lamas are always giving the blessings. They see everybody the same. You want to see that? You look at Garshan Rinpoche. He doesn't
Yeah.
love some people and dislike other people. He loves everyone the same. And he and Adi Rinpoche, they were in prison together. Adi Rinpoche, Tulku Orjin, they were friends when they were young. This is all the same, right? This and they're all in the context of Vajrayana, right? The radiation of the blessings of the master is always coming, but we're so obscured. We got so many thoughts, we got so many plans and ideas and stuff. We just can't feel it. So we need a method for purifying that, and that's what Vajrayana is really good about. So that's about Vajrayana, Dzogchen. I think they're inseparable. I
Yeah.
mean, I know that many people, it's very easy for the Dzogchen thing to turn completely conceptual. You read some of these Neo-Advaita books and stuff, and very dangerous. I think that get these very subtle concepts going on. Those can be hard to eradicate, but you can't have concepts if you do actual Dzogchen practices. It destroys concepts. So
Yeah.
that's about that.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Regard to the path of means, well, most people need support for their Dzogchen practice. Tokujin told me personally that he had never met anybody who was. There are three categories of practitioner. You know this: the instantaneous type, the what is usually called skipping the grades, Togalpa, and then the gradual type. Right? Everybody in the West thinks I must be a gradual person. I think those are actually quite rare. This is the kind of person
You mean the
that
instantaneous? They think they're
no,
in.
I mean gradual first. Hold on.
Oh,
I
okay.
know. I know.
Yeah.
Hold on. Just
No,
I
I
got a
think a
bunch of
lot of
ideas.
people want to go right to Dzogchen and they think they're
I
instantaneous,
mean,
but yeah.
Togorjan said he had never met anyone who was the instantaneous type.
Yeah, I heard they might not even exist in the world
Yeah, that's
anymore.
Arab
Right.
Dorje, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like you hear these stories occasionally of someone receiving the pointing out, or even not even from a qualified teacher, and then they remain in that forever. Best example of this, Ramana Maharishi.
Mm.
He was a Hindu, I know, but he was beyond Hinduism. That guy's amazing, incredible,
Mm.
super master. And he just had an insight and it never changed. He had it when he
Mm.
was 17. He died when he was 76 or something. And for that time, he was exactly the same. Amazing being.
Wow.
But this is super rare, right? So we just say we're definitely not the Chikchar, the instantaneous type. Most people think, oh, I must be the gradual type. But the hallmark of the gradual type is if you make progress, you don't fall back, right?
Mm.
You're like, you're going like this. How many people you know like that? Nobody, right? Most people are like this, right? So that's why I always use the definition of the it's not they say the term in Tibetan is togalpa, to leap around, right?
Mm.
Usually translated as leaping over. And
Mm.
people think, oh, must be that type, right? I'm jumping ahead. I don't have to follow the regular path. But what it really means, according to Eric Drew, who's one of my friends and an amazing dude in his own self, it means more like skipping around. So sometimes extremely high level understanding appears in the mind of even an ordinary person like me. You feel like,
Mm.
wow, I'm really getting it. And then 2 days later, you're like, what was that I got? We're going like this. But I think that most people these days, they're definitely not the instantaneous type, nor are they really the gradual type. People don't have the patience to do that.
Mm.
Right? We're skipping around. So, in order to help stabilize our insight, which we receive in the context of relationship with a teacher of some kind, we have what's called the path of means, right? It isn't only about just meditating on the nature of mind. Most people can't sustain it. They don't have enough merit to sustain that insight so it starts to really transform you. So you have to use methods, right? And the path of means consists of in Nyingma, it's a helper. In Kagyu and the Sarma schools, mostly, it's the actual path. You practice tumo, right? Inner heat practice to control the pranic energy and bring it into the central channel. And when that happens, then you have a non-conceptual experience, and the master can point out the nature of mind based on that. But who has the wherewithal to do enough tumo, right? Or enough exercise, chokur, the jumping around exercises and stuff, this kind of thing. So in Nyingma, it's usually used as a sort of a support. It has two aspects, right? Geksel and Bokdun. Geksel means to remove obstacles, wrong views and blockages in our channels and whatever. And Bokdun means to enhance the practice. So usually the path of means is about that, and it
Mm.
consists of all the yogic stuff from sleep yoga and dream yoga and the physical exercises and breath holding and all that business. There's a whole bunch of
Yeah.
stuff. Sexual is where that is and that kind of thing. Is
Yeah.
that
And oh yeah, yeah. And just to be clear to the listener, that's all part of the Vajrayana path, as
all this stuff?
both
I mean, the
in,
Vajrayana path is massive. You can do
yeah,
anything. They got everything.
yeah,
What is
yeah.
Tantra? I mean, if you think about it, it's a Tantra. Tantra means continuity,
Yeah.
continuity of the practice into all aspects of life, every aspect, right? And so even sleep, right? Something you would think like, well, if you're going to take a break from your life, it's when you're asleep. Even they got methods for bringing that on the path. Everything.
I This is how lazy I am. I think, oh man, now I got to practice in my sleep. I wanted a break. I wanted to just be in ignorance for 8 hours.
Yeah,
Um, anyways, so I guess I know we're kind of at time, but for you, this, yeah, you kind of said it because the removing obstructions, enhancing, that's how we use it generally in the Nyingma tradition. Um, for you personally, kind of like these, how have they come alive for you, or what's your kind of relationship to them, which I'm sure is multifaceted, the path of means.
I love yoga. I'm a
Yeah.
yogi, right? I'm a yogin. So I love yoga. I love hatha style Indian yoga. I love Tibetan yoga. I do that stuff every day and have for a long time. How has it affected me? Well, it certainly clears away thoughts, I mean, it makes you have less thoughts, which makes
Mm,
meditation easier. And you're not as driven by your thoughts. You don't have to worry about that as much. It also makes your body incredibly supple and makes your life a lot easier. My only goal as I get older, I like athletics, so I do a lot of sports and stuff. But my only real goal with working out, which I suppose this stuff would all be in that
mm,
context, um, my only goal is to maintain my physical well-being and my ability to forget my body. I like
mm,
to sit. I think it's entirely because of yogic practice that I can sit hours and hours and hours, sit 3, 4 hours every day, and I don't
mm,
have to move around, and my knees are still okay, and I feel very loose and easy in my body, and I think that is what it comes from is yoga of all sorts, and that doesn't mean you have to do it, but it certainly makes your experience of being alive a lot nicer when you don't have chronic pain and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying this can reverse conditions, but if we start early enough, I've been doing that stuff a long time, uh, it makes the body malleable, flexible in a way, both inside and outside. Helps your breath to be controlled. It keeps you away from sickness. And I haven't experienced, I can't float above the ground, but I certainly feel exactly like I did 35 years ago. My body feels the same. And
yeah,
that I attribute that to yoga in general, whether that's, the combination of Tibetan and hatha, which is what I do. But if some people do only hatha. My friend David Christensen, he's a lama, and
Yeah.
he's like one of the experts on the Longchen and Trilcore, and he still has it. He's very easy. He's like very smooth, right? Jam, like very works. It does work. It opens up your channels. It makes insight easier. You have a little bit more love of life, I guess. A little bit more exuberance because you feel better. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess that's what it's done for me.
Beautiful. The Bindu is nice
Oh,
and healthy, as they would say.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah. Joy.
everybody's in the same position, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
depends on factors. And I don't, the Trilcore itself, the actual yogic exercises of Tibet, not only are they secret and so difficult to learn, they're also, well, we would say quite violent, right? A lot of jumping around and I don't know how good that is to learn when you're older, but James Bay teaches it all the time. And he's also got this kind of like magic body that he seems to be extremely flexible and comfortable in his skin. So, and he teaches a lot of people who are older. So maybe it does work for everybody if you take it easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Um, and I don't want to take more of your time, so maybe this is for part two if we do it. Is all you have this whole corpus of work you do and exploration of sacred medicines and alchemy and all these things, which I also for me I would put in the category of means. I'm not sure if you put it there, um, but
Maybe.
it's support, right? Removing obstacles, enhancing. So just anything briefly on that, and then perhaps that's like a separate conversation because that's a big.
Talk about that, but I give just a little bit. Yeah, when you say sacred medicine, people think like ayahuasca and stuff. We're not
Yeah, I don't mean that.
talking about traditional. For me, it's mostly traditional Tibetan medicine,
Yeah.
and I got exposed to that in the '90s, and it changed the way my mind was working. I couldn't believe it. They really have a strong grasp on uh, what makes you able to sleep, what makes you not so stressed and not
Mm,
so easy, and everybody needs that these days because the world's so complicated and our own internal worlds are so complicated. So yeah, I started a business, distributing Tibetan medicine a long time ago, and that has brought a lot of benefit to myself and a lot of people, and it's really nice. Everyone should explore that stuff. And then there's lots of types of that's herbal medicine, right? Which is like
yeah.
has a physical component. Energetic medicine, which I'm also interested in, things like Reiki or homeopathy, this kind of stuff where there's no real herbs or drugs involved, that also can be very powerful support on the path. As you practice more, you become more and more sensitive, and we need a way to keep our energies under control. And it's easy to do with these kind of formulas. You can be taken for long periods. They're very safe. They mix well with Western drugs, and they tend over time to lead people to a more and more healthy way of being, sleeping better, not so anxious, not so depressed, this kind of stuff, which can be beneficial in all areas of life. I love that stuff. We can talk about that anytime you want.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, because there's also things you curate and or provide sell to others, which is like related to more Dharma substances like liberation upon tasting and things like that.
All
Which,
that kind of stuff. Where can you get that
uh,
stuff, And I've been so
yeah,
lucky to gather all these things and make these connections. I feel like, Westerners, they don't have any access. And now even the sources are further and further away and more difficult to connect with. And so, yeah, we have two businesses. We have City Energetics, which is all about Tibetan medicine, and we have Future Alchemy, which is a kind of, you know, I've always been very interested in alchemy of all sorts, and so this is kind of trying to keep that alive a little bit.
yeah, yeah. It's really wonderful because I mean, to me, I see it as all. I mean, besides what you said, which is just well-being, optimization, all of that, which is I think common to everybody, religious or not, spiritual or not. I think there's this whole other area of Vajrayana of these sacred substances, which includes the land, includes stupas, includes, all kinds of medicines, so, that's a whole other area that I think unless you go to Tibet or you spend time, in the tradition in Nepal, India, etc., it's just hard to I mean, I've always been fascinated with that stuff and especially it's connected to Vajrayana ritual, but it's sort of like, in a way, it's it's magic, but it's also there is a subtle cause and effect relationship to it. And once we start to
Okay.
understand that, it's not so esoteric. you know? Yeah.
And the great thing about whether it's Tibetan medicine or some of the alchemical stuff or stupas, any of this sort of thing, you don't have to believe it. You don't
Yeah.
have to believe it, right? You just have to be open. We have a certain sensor in us. And as you practice meditation more and your mind gets more calm in general, and your insight grows to whatever degree it does, you can connect to these things and you don't have to wonder if it's true. You don't have to ask anyone. You know
Yeah.
where it's at. And that's very it's very it makes you more enthusiastic, toward the tradition, which because really all types of meditation, whether it's Buddhist or non-Buddhist, you have to put a lot of time in. I wish it worked
Yeah.
fast, but it doesn't. So you have to really tear down.
Totally. No, and I love that you brought in that point up in a few different parts of our conversation of like, again, forgive me and correct me if I'm misinterpreting it. Like using our own minds and bodies as a barometer, like using it as a tool to measure what's going on to a certain degree. I mean, of course, we can be wrong sometimes, but it's sort of like, to me, that's a wonderful way to approach these traditions without dogma, because it's sort of always that, okay, like what's your experience? How are you perceiving this, right?
Yeah, totally what you mean. Yeah, I think it's important for Westerners to realize that each individual person is the center of their own mandala.
Yeah.
It's not like this is the mandala of Tolkien and I'm over here somewhere, or maybe over here. No, I am the very center of my own mandala. And we have to find a system, a teachings, a teacher that works for us. And Vajrayana is not for everybody, like I said, right? And someone else might get a whole lot more out of any other thing, right? And that's a matter we tend to want to give somebody else the responsibility. Oh, you're my teacher, fix me. Look, I'm all broken. Help. This doesn't work, right? It's really that
Yeah.
the teacher might show the way, they might give you some blessing or some instruction or something, but then it's up to you to do it, to be with it, to inculcate it, to imbibe it at your deepest level. And we got to remember, we're the center of the mandala. Buddhism is only about one person, and it's you, right?
Yeah.
It's not about some master in the past. Who cares about them, right? It's me. My experience of suffering needs to be liberated, not somebody else. And so I think when we see it that way, then we're more open minded. Realize like, whoa, I'm the responsible party here, so I'm gonna have to try.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love it. And I think that's a great place to end, unless there's anything we missed that you want to chat about.
And again, it's fun. I like this kind of thing.
Yeah, me too. That's what it's all about. Sharing, just sharing these things. And, I'm sure people listen to this podcast who just come in at many different vantage points. And I know they're going to find your experience and your shares useful. So just a big thank you for that. Where can people find you? We already mentioned a few things, but there's Denver's Ocean, right?
DenverZochen.com. That's like the working title of our little thing. We have a group that meets every Wednesday that's open to the public. And if you're in Denver, you're certainly welcome. It's at a yoga studio here. You can contact me. We have a Tuesday night group that's been meeting since 2002, I think, and meet every week. That's for people who are practitioners, like who are into it.
Yeah.
It's not a big group, but yeah, maybe 50 people. And that's happening. And we've got a lot of projects. Yedharma.com is like our stupa, overturn these terrible circumstances that are supposed to be coming in the near future. We put like 1,400 stupas all over the world. And we're working on this kind of thing. There's a lot of things. But yeah, if you look at Denver's Oakchen or Yedharma.com or City Energetics, Future Alchemy, those are all, maybe you put them in the notes for the
Yeah,
podcast.
I'll put them in the notes. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, wonderful. And yeah, and unfortunately, my Bimala, which is one of Joe's probably most popular products at City Energetics, which really helps with lung issues and sleep and stuff, anxiety. It got stuck in Mexican customs, so it got turned back. So now I have to. I'll get it, but I can attest. These things are powerful when especially just the speediness we deal with. A lot of the medicines are just great for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks, Joe. You're awesome as usual, man. Thank you so much. Okay. Take care.